Can you even call it a party dress if it doesn't have a swag on it? Hello my lovelies, I hope that all is good in your neck of the wood. In today's video I'm going to be making a 1940s celebration dress. As you may or may not know, June is a month of jubilant celebration because not only is it the Platinum Jubilee, or the Platty Jubes as it's been nicknamed, but it's also my birthday and I am celebrating all sorts of things this June. A long time ago I made this dress, the B5880, a retro Butterick dress from 1951. I love these sort of dolman sleeve, swags and fur below type 1940s dresses. They really are rather epic. But I was very disappointed in this pattern. I made quite a big size, like an 18 or something, and it just didn't fit me, so I'm going back in. I refuse to be beaten by this pattern. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to use the swag piece, so this panel that goes on and creates the swag, if you can see, use that, and then I am going to create a very basic pattern using my bespoke dolman sleeve bodice block and skirt block. You can see how I've drafted these and get the PDF downloadable over at Tara School of Dressmaking on Patreon. The link for that is below should you want to join my pattern drafting sewing school. We have a lot of fun over there, and June is a bumper month full of celebration. I have bought this really beautiful viscose fabric. It's a sort of a dupe for the types of fabrics that these dresses, and I kind of think of Dubarry and, you know, that kind of brand of clothing for these dresses. So I'm going to be using that. That's from Rainbow Fabrics Kilburn, and then I'm going to be drafting a very basic pattern. I think that I want to use this vintage pattern as my inspiration. I really love the shape of this, which is basically my dolman sleeve block and pencil skirt. Just going to draw around those, add seam allowance, but I really like the way that this sort of draped panel is folded, so I'm going to use the pattern piece from the Butterick pattern and add that on the top of the pencil skirt. And then I really like this idea of a bit of a bow tie, like a pussy bow at the neck. Sort of adds a level of sophistication, I think. So I'm going to be kind of Frankenhacking, as I like to call it, several different things together to create what I'm hoping will be a jubilant celebration dress, perfect to celebrate whatever queen it is that you love.
To get started making the pattern for my celebration dress, I'm simply drawing around my dolman sleeve block on spot and cross paper. The block is the basic shape of a garment, whether that's skirts, trousers or whatever, and there's no seam allowance, and you can basically do all sorts of amendments to the block to create the design that you want, but this one's really straightforward. I love it when things are really simple. I'm transferring through the darts, and I'm going to do this to the back bodice as well, and there are very few amendments that I need to make for this one. The wonderful thing about having blocks that are made to your own measurements is that you don't have to do all the annoying fitting and have that disappointment when you make up a commercial pattern and the majority of your efforts seem to be in adjusting, redoing and so on. it's always a real disappointment, I find. So this way, having blocks that fit you perfectly means that you can make the clothes of your dreams to your proportion and spend time doing things you love, like going to parties or hanging out with friends. And by hanging out with friends, I essentially mean hanging out with your cat or cats. I'm labelling up the dress. I've decided to call it the June dress because it's June and I'm never not imaginative. All I've done is drawn around the block and added 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around, and then I'm going to do exactly the same with my bespoke skirt block. I make sure that I use my little notcher because I love a gadget, and mark the legs of the darts, and I'm going to have a little opening at the front here and then the tie going around the neck. I'm very excited about this dress. To make sure that I get the skirt the right length, I've drawn around it as you can see and the darts are there. I'm matching up the swag panel from the Butterick pattern along that side seam. This is the front, by the way, to make sure that I get the right length, because that Butterick dress is a bit longer than my bespoke skirt block. You normally finish your skirt blocks around about the knee point, and then you can raise the hem or lower the hem, or really raise the hem depending on your heart's delight. And here I have my completed June dress pattern, the bodices front and back, the skirt front and back, and then the panel from the Butterick pattern. I haven't drafted the necktie yet, but I'm going to do that once the dress is made up. So now on to the really fun bit, which is the sewing. I don't know that there's anything more lovely than a pile of freshly cut pattern pieces all ready to be sewn into a dreamy garment that you're super excited to wear. I use a ready-to-wear production method that I was taught many moons ago at uni. So I pin in and prepare every single thing I can up to a certain point. So here I've put in all the darts, I've pinned every seam that I possibly can, so that will be the first thing that I sew before I move on to the next thing. And then we come to the swag and how to do this pleating, folding, gathering or whatever. And all I can say, Butterick, is really, what exactly do you think you are doing? You would think that a really important bit of construction would have really clear instructions, really clear pictures, a step-by-step that made sense. But no, we shall put gibberish here instead, because that's so much fun for the home sewist. I ended up just making this up because this was beyond ridiculous. So not only is this pattern an awful fit, but also, like many commercial patterns, all the instructions are rubbish. What I did was I marked through these points with a luminous pen. Really, you would do this with a tailor's tack, but I was a bit cross, to be honest. So I marked everything through, and then essentially what I did was I just joined the dots. So I created pleats. On the pattern it says tucks, but really you're pleating the edges together. It seemed to work out in the end, and I got on to the more enjoyable task of sewing all the bits that I like. And I also find winding the bobbin a very simple pleasure, and I usually sing the song, but I won't put you through that. So here's the way that I pinned the tuck detail on the swag, just creating these little bits to be sewn. No idea if that's what you're supposed to do, but it looked nice in the end. And that's all you can hope for. I decided to do a rolled hem on the machine around the curved edge of the swag to neaten it. I think the pattern says to line it, I can't remember actually, but this worked pretty well. The next day I carried on sewing my skirt section of the dress. What I did here was I put the swag on top of the front skirt and edge stitched it in place. You can see some of these marks where I did the pleats in the swag, but never mind, you can't really see them. I'm really pleased with the swag actually. And then the next thing is to overlock all the seams that need overlocking. And then what I am going to do is start putting the bodice together. But before that, I need to just stitch the opening down, and I find it easier to do everything as flat as possible. So before I sewed the front to the back, I actually did any stitching flat. It just makes life much simpler. And everything is sewn together, all the seams are sewn together. And although the seam allowance was 1.5 centimetres, I ended up doing just slightly less. I overlocked all those seams, and then it was time to put the bodice to the skirt. So with right sides together, I lined up the side seams and pinned those first, then pinned the centre backs and the centre fronts, and then pinned all the way around the waist seam before sewing it together with the seam allowance and then overlocking it. The bodice and skirt are now sewn together and overlocked. The centre front's looking nice and neat. I've overlocked the sleeves and I'm going to turn them under and top stitch them in place. I had thought that I would bind them, but I'm happy with this. I've got the zip to sew in, and I'm going to be sewing in a centre lapped zip, which is my favourite method of sewing in a zip. I like my zips on the side, although I know that some people really don't. And here is the dress so far. Not too many things to do now before I can put this on and celebrate. So here is the zip sewn in, and the thing I learned here is that it's really hard to undo and do up a zip when you're holding a camera. I decide to hand stitch the hem in place rather than machine stitch it because I just think it gives a much nicer finish. And then once I've done that, the last thing I need to do is the tie on the neckline, and I'm using the pattern I made for the Sweetie blouse, which was a recent Patreon exclusive. Once the necktie is sewn, there's just one last press and the dress is ready to wear to celebrate the Platinum Jubes or just life in general. And here is the dress all finished and hanging up, ready to be worn. The one thing that I think I should have done is just made the bodice ever so slightly shorter because it is slightly long on me, and here I am turning myself into a 1940s person, starlet, film star. I can dream, can't I? And the swag is definitely swagalicious. Very happy with it. Thank you so much for spending time with me in my little cottage by the sea on this sewing project. I really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have and haven't subscribed, then please do so. And if you want to know more about Tara's School of Dressmaking, then the link is below. See you next time, lovelies. Bye.